Leonard Voss. The year was 1956. Memphis, Tennessee. When he walked into a room, nobody shouted. Nobody said, "Look who just walked in!" But everyone said it with their eyes. Why? Leonard Voss wasn't doing anything. He wasn't talking, he wasn't performing, he wasn't even smiling. He just walked in. He stepped through the door, and something happened. Nobody could describe what that something was, but everyone felt it somehow, and the atmosphere of the room changed. What was this man's secret, and why is this secret being sold to you today by a personal development industry worth millions of dollars, but never told to you correctly? Why can't it be told correctly? I won't give the answer just yet. The 8th point is the most important. Subscribe before you get there. This channel is in pursuit of truth, not performance. 1. They entered a room, but without rushing. Providence, Rhode Island. Raymond Ashby walked into a meeting. He opened the door calmly. He stepped inside, and he stopped. 1 second, maybe 2 seconds. He surveyed the room. He scanned the faces at the table, and he said nothing. Then he walked. This pause was so brief that nobody noticed it, but everyone felt it. The tone of the room changed in an instant. Conversations slowed. And when Raymond sat down, the weight at the table seemed to shift toward him. After the meeting, one of Raymond's colleagues said, "I don't know why I always want to listen to Raymond. He doesn't talk much, but there's something about how he walks in." That something was the pause. In the 1950s, social psychologists examined the relationship between presence and space. The first few seconds of a person entering a room directly determine how those around them will categorize that person. Those who enter hurriedly appear small. Those who enter calmly appear large. This was not an impression trick. It was a physiological response. The nervous system automatically finds the person who claims the space trustworthy. This response happens in the subconscious. Within seconds. Today, influencer culture tells you, stand out to attract attention, act large, make your voice heard the moment you walk in, be visible, create an impression. But Raymond Ashby just stopped. And that pause echoed even when everyone else was raising their voice. Because silence draws attention in noise. A pause is the oldest language of confidence. 2. They shook hands, and it was a ritual. Savannah, Georgia. Eugene Marsh was in a job interview. The man across from him reached over from the other side of the table. Eugene got up. He walked. He stopped. He extended his hand. It was just a handshake. But Eugene's palm came in flat, neither sweaty nor weak. The grip lasted 1 second. Not so short that it made you think, what was that? Not so long that it felt unsettling. And the eyes stayed on the other person, directly on them. The gaze didn't divide. It didn't drift to the side before the handshake ended. The man across from him sat back at the table. The conversation began. But that night, that man went home and told his wife, "I met someone interesting today." Why? Because of the handshake. Because of 1 second. The handshake ritual in the 1950s was one of the most important physical indicators of social power. Research at the University of Michigan found that a firm handshake created an impression of trustworthiness and competence in the other party. This finding was repeated over decades and remained consistent. A handshake was not a psychological trick. It was an indicator of character, a promise made by the body. Today, the grooming industry sells you a 10-step handshake technique. At what angle to extend your hand, how long to hold it, how to turn the wrist. But Eugene Marsh wasn't applying a technique. He was there, fully there, and that was enough. A handshake was a promise made by the body. 3. When they looked, they really looked. Louisville, Kentucky. Bernard Halley was sitting at a bar. He had had a long day. His glass was in front of him. Someone came up beside him, asked something. It was a small thing, an everyday thing. Bernard put down his glass. He turned completely, and he looked. Just looked. At nothing else. Not at the sound behind him, not at whoever was walking in the door, not at the drink in his hand. Only at the person across from him. His eyes didn't move. His attention didn't scatter. The man who was speaking paused for a moment, then continued, slower than usual, clearer than usual, as if what he had to say had suddenly become more valuable because someone was actually listening. Bernard hadn't spoken at all, but that man still remembers that conversation today. Communication research in the 1950s systematically documented the weight that eye contact carries in social interaction. Individuals who held long and sincere eye contact created a feeling of trustworthiness, attention, and significance in the other party. This was not a technique. The men of that era weren't divided by phones. The person in front of them was the only objective reality of that moment, and that singularity created something magical. Today, social media has normalized being divided in every environment. Phone at the table, notification mid-conversation, screen at dinner, and the person across from you feels this. Every time. Like a small rejection. Like the message, "You are not important right now." Nobody delivers this message out loud, but it is delivered with every division. Bernard Halley looked. And that was more powerful than anything that could have been said. Keep going. What I've told you so far were things visible from the outside, but real charisma came from the inside. And to understand this, I first had to believe something very wrong. 4. They spoke little, and every word carried weight. Hartford, Connecticut. Herbert Lange was in a meeting. 5 people were talking, on top of each other, cutting each other off. There was noise in the room, but it was a hollow noise. Herbert went quiet. He was quiet for 10 minutes. Everyone spoke. Everyone shared their opinion. Everyone talked over everyone else who had a voice. Herbert watched. He listened. He said nothing. Then he said one sentence. The room went quiet. Herbert's sentence wasn't extraordinary or especially clever. It was simply true, and it came from 10 minutes of silence. That silence had given it weight. Every word had been chosen. And chosen words are far more powerful than poured out words. After the meeting, the manager said, "Herbert speaks little, but he always says the right thing." This was no coincidence. He said the right thing because he spoke little. Princeton University sociologist Irving Goffman, in his 1959 work, examined the relationship between silence and social authority. The things said by those who spoke little carried far more weight than those said by those who spoke much, because every word of the person who speaks little is a choice, and choice carries value. Unchosen words scatter like air and turn into nothing. Today, influencer culture encourages sharing every thought, pouring every emotion out as a comment, making every moment into content, tweeting every idea. And in this environment, silence looks like a deficiency. The person who doesn't speak must not know something. The person who stays silent must not be able to say something. But Herbert Lange knew. He was just saving it. Herbert Lange saved for 10 minutes and said one sentence. 5. They wore their clothes didn't wear them. Tacoma, Washington. Lloyd Beckett was heading to work. He took his jacket from behind the hanger. He put it on. He buttoned it. He looked in the mirror. Once, he adjusted his collar. Then he left. Lloyd Beckett wasn't wearing something new. It was an inexpensive jacket, a few years old, but it was straight, clean, and it sat on him, on his shoulders, his chest, his arms, as if it had been tailored for him. Someone passing him on the street looked back. What they said isn't known, but they looked. And that look came not from an expensive jacket, but from the man inside that jacket. Sociologists examining men's clothing in the 1950s found something consistent. The men of that era used clothing not as a tool for image, but as an indicator of readiness. Getting dressed was being serious. Not looking serious. These two things are very different. Looking serious is a performance. Being serious is a posture. And posture shows through the fabric. It seeps out. It is felt. Today, the grooming industry makes billions of dollars. Which brand, which fit, which color combination, which fragrance, which accessory. This industry tells you, wear the right clothes, look like the right man, as if the right fabric creates the right person, as if a brand can build a character. But Lloyd Beckett didn't button the brand. He buttoned the button, and he was ready, and someone on the street looked back. Being ready is the first step of attractiveness. I need to stop for a moment now, because I was wrong about this too. For years I thought charisma was a personality trait. Either you have it or you don't. Some people are born with it. These men were lucky. They were born more charismatic. Their time was different. Society was different. Expectations were different. And I comforted myself with this thought. I was wrong. These men hadn't been born with charisma. They were living with charisma. And what they lived was very simple. They spoke little. They didn't look away. They didn't rush. They gave their word and kept it. They truly looked at the person beside them. They waited for them to finish. These habits formed a posture over time. That posture was charisma. None of them had learned it, but all of them were doing it, because that culture had shaped them that way, and that culture no longer exists. I understood this too late. 6. They gave their word, and they kept what they gave. Omaha, Nebraska. Sylvester Kane had told a neighbor, "I'll come by Saturday at 9 to help." Saturday at 9:05, Sylvester's car door closed. In front of the neighbor's house, the neighbor came to the door, still half asleep, holding his coffee. "You're early," he said. Sylvester smiled. "I said 9. Simple. But 20 years later, that neighbor spoke of Sylvester Kane this way. Sylvester never said anything grand to me, never had a deep conversation, but everything he said happened. And because of that, when I looked at him, I felt something different. I stood differently in front of him. I believed him in everything." Where did this belief come from? Not from grand gestures. It came from a car pulling up at 9:05. Research in the American business world of the 1950s documented something consistent. Trustworthiness was the most critical factor determining an individual's prestige in their social circle. And trustworthiness was built not with grand gestures, but with small commitments. Being there at 9 was the quietest and most lasting way of saying, "You matter to me," and this message outlasts every "I love you" ever spoken. Modern dating coaches teach you how to look, how to speak, how to text, which words make you seem more attractive, which emoji makes you seem warmer, but nobody says, do what you say, even if it's small, every time, just that. Sylvester Kane was at the door at 9:05, and that was greater than any technique. 7. They were fully present in the room. Raleigh, North Carolina. Reginald Holt was at a wedding. Long table, many people, much noise. Reginald was at the corner of the table, but the people beside him always talked to him. Why? Reginald was looking at them, really looking. That year there were no cell phones. He had no other event, no notifications. There was only that moment and that table. Reginald didn't know this because there was no other way, but this no other way was his greatest advantage. The people beside him felt this, and that feeling created an attraction. Sociologist Ray Birdwhistle, in research on body language in the 1950s, found this. When people feel genuinely attended to in a conversation, they automatically find the person across from them more intelligent, more trustworthy, and more interesting. This is not a judgment, it is a feeling. And over time, this feeling builds a reputation. Strong, quiet, earned. Today, social media has normalized being half present in every environment. One eye on the screen, one ear in the conversation. And the person across from you feels this every time, like a small rejection, a rejection that is not noticed but is felt, and this feeling accumulates. Over time, it pulls that person back. It closes a space for you. Reginald Holt was fully present, not because he had no phone, but because he had no need for one, and everyone felt this. 8. They never praised themselves, but their work spoke. Shreveport, Louisiana. Vincent Cale was a factory manager. That year, efficiency at his factory increased by 20%. In a small city, this was big news. The city newspaper wanted to do an interview. Vincent agreed. The reporter came to his office. Photos were taken. Questions were asked. The reporter asked, "What is the secret of this success, Mr. Cale?" Vincent thought. He thought for a long time. He didn't rush. Then he said, "I have good people." He said nothing else. The reporter waited for more, but nothing came. When that interview was published, everyone in the factory read it, because their manager had seen them, and lines formed to work at that factory, because working there meant being seen. Research psychologist Roy Baumeister, in a major meta-analysis in the 1980s, examining decades of social prestige data, found something striking. Individuals who praised themselves drew attention in the short term, but lost reputation in the long term. Those who never praised themselves but let their work speak experienced exactly the opposite. And this finding was confirmed again and again both in business and in social life. Modern influencer culture presents self-promotion as a skill. Build your brand, stand out, tell your story, gain followers, be the main character of your own story. But Vincent Cale said nothing. He said, "I have good people," and people lined up for him. Silence is the most powerful marketing. 9. They let the other person finish speaking. Spokane, Washington. Not Lloyd Beckett this time, Bernard Cole, a different man, a different city. Bernard was talking with a friend. The friend was telling him something. He was talking for a long time, perhaps too long. Bernard went quiet. Was he waiting for his turn? No. Bernard was genuinely listening. When his friend finished, Bernard waited 1 second. Then he spoke. His friend said for years, "When I said something to Bernard, I felt understood. I don't know why. I just felt it." Why? Because Bernard let him finish. And that 1 second wait was the most powerful message. I know what I want to say, but what you have to say is more important. Communication psychologists in the 1950s examined listening behavior. Individuals who didn't interrupt the other person, who waited for them to finish, and who paused a moment before responding were found to build far stronger and more lasting bonds in their social relationships. This was not a strategy. It was the demonstration of a genuine value given to the other person, and people felt that value. Today, social media has everyone talking at the same time. Comments pile on top of each other. Everyone is waiting for their turn to tell their own story. But when the turn comes, most of the time we arrive not from listening, but from preparing our answer. And the person across from you feels this. Bernard Cole waited 1 second, and his friend called him for the rest of his life. And this brings us back to Leonard Voss. Memphis, Tennessee, 1956. He's walking through the door. Nobody shouts. Nobody says, "Here he comes." But everyone notices. I know why now. Leonard Voss entered with a pause. He didn't look away while shaking hands. He spoke little. He chose every word. He put on his jacket and arrived ready. He gave his word and kept it. He truly looked at the person beside him. He waited for them to finish, and he never praised himself. None of these were a technique. These were the reflections of a way of life, and that way of life lived within their culture. These were things learned without being taught, like breathing, like walking. Today, a billion-dollar industry sells you these reflections piece by piece. Eye contact techniques, handshake guides, silence tactics, dressing manuals, dating coaches, personal brand specialists, each one selling a piece. And even if the pieces come together, they can't deliver the whole. Because charisma has no algorithm. Charisma has a routine, and that routine begins every morning. It continues with every small choice, in every word, every glance, every handshake. Leonard Voss had taken no courses, had hired no coach, had learned no technique. He had simply lived, and the room changed. Write a comment starting with the word jacket. Tell us about the most charismatic person you've known and their smallest but most powerful gesture. One sentence is enough. Because these stories are still here, just like Leonard Voss walking through the door. The room is still changing.